Welcome, traveller. Tonight, we invite you into a tale woven from silence and song, a story that drifts like moonlight across still waters. Let the outside world fade. Allow yourself to walk the quiet paths of Oakhaven, where echoes of the past and whispers of destiny guide us into the heart of the Moonlit Archives. Listen. Can you hear it? No, of course you can't. Not anymore. The great music has receded into memory, a ghost of a vibration on the air, a faded inscription in the ledger of the world. But I can remember. I am Elara, and my mind is an archive of sounds that have ceased to be. I am the keeper of what was lost and the witness to what was restored. This is Oakhaven, my home, or what's left of its song at least. Our village didn't just exist next to the great wood Tarnufern. We were woven into its very melody, a single thread in its vast living tapestry. The forest was our provider, our protector, our myth. Its borders were marked not by fences or stones, but by the change in the air, a thickening of magic that tingled on the skin, a deepening of sound into a profound, complex harmony, a sensation of being watched by something ancient, patient, and benevolent. We were not its owners, but its partners in a dance as old as the hills themselves. We were taught from the cradle to revere it, to leave its deep heart untouched, to take only what we needed, and always give thanks in the old ways. A whispered word of gratitude to a tree before taking its fallen branch, and a libation of water poured onto the roots of a berry bush after harvesting. And for generations, its vibrant, living music was the constant rhythm of our world, the breath in our lungs, the pulse in our veins. I can close my eyes and still conduct the symphony of my childhood, movement by movement. The first movement, dawn. The silver thread chirping of the dawn finches, a cheerful, chaotic overture counterpointing the rooster's brass section crow from the village coop. Then, the deep, resonant murmur of the first tree, felt rather than heard, a foundational bass note that vibrated in the soles of your feet, a sensation that promised solidity, age, and an unshakable permanence. The second movement, day. The gentle chattering melody of the Glimmerbrook as it danced over mossy stones, gossiping with the reeds, carrying stories from the high hills down to the sleepy riverlands. The rustle of leaves in the afternoon breeze, a whispered conversation between ancient oaks discussing the weather of centuries, their language one of sigh and creak and rustle. The third movement, dusk. The evening chorus of crickets, a rhythmic pulsing tapestry that wrapped around the village each night. A sound so constant and reassuring, you only notice its profound absence, the auditory equivalent of the stars above. That was our life. That was the music we breathed. It was the backdrop to every first kiss stolen in the clover-filled meadows, every hushed secret shed between friends under the willow trees, every lullaby sung from a mother to her child in the deep of the night. The song was our certainty, our comfort, our identity. We were the people of the singing wood. I can still feel the sun-warmed stone of the bridge under my bare feet, the cool shock of the Glimmerbrook, and the vibration of the village square during the summer dance. The air thick with fiddle music and the scent of honey cakes. It wasn't just sound, it was a texture, a flavor, a complete world. The first hint of the silencing came not with a scream, but with a sigh. A subtle, almost polite absence, like a single violin in a vast orchestra laying down its bow between notes. A silence so brief you questioned if you'd ever heard the note at all. It was a Tuesday, I remember. The air was crisp, carrying the twin scents of baking bread from Brent's oven and the damp, leafy promise of impending autumn. I was sitting on the sun-warmed stone wall outside the archives, a place that was more home to me than my own small attic room. Before me was a tear in a priceless calfskin map of the northern star routes, a task I found deeply soothing. The repetitive motion of the needle, the feel of the sturdy linen thread, the act of preserving something old and valuable. It was a meditation. Near the wood's edge, Old Man Hemlock's grandchildren, Lyra and Finn, were playing a raucous game of tag. Lyra, all flying red curls and boundless energy, shrieked with mock terror, as Finn, more solid and determined, nearly caught her. Her voice, bright and sharp as splintered glass, rang out towards the dark, brooding line of trees. And then, nothing. Her shriek hit the tree line and stopped. It didn't fade. It was severed. Vanished, swallowed whole by the waiting gloom. It was a wound in the world, where sound should have been. I remember pausing, my needle hovering over the frayed parchment. A peculiar coldness, unrelated to the weather, traced its way down my spine like a drop of ice water. I looked around, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. But no one else seemed to have noticed. Bren was sweeping his step. Old Granny Yu was dozing on her porch, her knitting still in her lap. Life went on. The world felt thinner. A single pixel of color had vanished from the painting of our reality. The next evening, the absence grew from a pixel to a stain. I was walking home from the archives, the sky awash of violet and orange, and I realized I was straining to hear something, my head cocked like a confused dog. It took me a full minute of standing still in the middle of the path, my brow furrowed, to identify what was missing. The crickets. Their evening chorus, a sound so constant it was the very fabric of the night itself. The auditory equivalent of the stars above, simply didn't begin. The silence that followed was profound. A heavy, woolen blanket that smothered the village. People ate their suppers in quiet rooms, their ears unconsciously straining for a sound that never came. Doors were closed a little more softly. Conversations were hushed, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile world. A week later, the birds were gone. Not dead, we told ourselves, finding no bodies. Just absent, vacated. The dawn was no longer greeted by a fanfare of song, but by a grey, soundless light that felt like a betrayal. The silence was no longer an absence, it was a presence, a fifth season, the season of quiet. Without the dawn chorus, sleep felt thin. We woke as if something vital had been withheld. The world itself seemed tired. The old folk, those whose memories were long libraries of past times, felt it most acutely. Granny Yu, who smelled of pine sap and faded memory, would sit on her porch and mutter into her knitting, her needles clicking like the last frantic beetles. "It's a sickness of the soul," she'd croak to anyone who would listen, her eyes milky with cataracts but sharp with perception. "The wood's heart is grieving. Something has been stolen from it. The music is bleeding out, and the silence is rushing in to fill the wound. Mark my words." The young, those my age, tried to rebel against the quiet. They'd gather in the square around a bonfire, force laughter, sing drinking songs with a desperate, ragged gusto, trying to beat back the emptiness with sheer volume. But their voices sounded thin and brittle, collapsing into the oppressive stillness without resonance. The fire itself seemed to burn silently, its cheerful crackle and pop extinguished before it could reach our ears. The silence was a patient, inexorable hunter. It didn't attack. It simply advanced, one absent note at a time, withering the heart of our world, turning it into a cold, empty hall where no sound dared to resonate. I tried to document it. I started a new ledger on the properties of quiet. But my entries were short, despairing things. Day 17. The mill wheel turns, but makes no sound. It is a ghost of industry. How does one map a negative space? A geography of loss. I was born for a quiet life. An orphan raised by the village's communal, if distant grace. I had learned early to find my family in the past. I was the sole apprentice to Master Theron, the village cartographer and archivist, a man whose back was stooped from a lifetime spent bent over manuscripts, but whose eyes were kind. My world was one of parchment and ink, of tracing the faded lines of forgotten trails and translating the spidery scripts of long-dead surveyors. I was a keeper of records, a preserver of what was, not a shaper of what could be. I had no family name, no great destiny waiting in the wings. My legacy was the dust of the archives and the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly drawn coastline. I was a listener, an observer. The silence, in a way, was just another state to be documented. A tragic, terrifying one. But my grandmother, Arianel, whom I barely remembered, a faint impression of silver hair, a scent of lavender, and a voice like distant wind chimes, had left me two things. The first was a compass. It was a beautiful, perplexing thing, crafted of silver that always felt warm to the touch, as if holding a captured sunbeam. Its face was etched, not with degrees or directions, but with faces of the moon, and strange flowing runes that Master Theron said were a lost language of the stars. And its needle, a sliver of polished obsidian, never pointed north. It trembled and shivered, pointing seemingly at random, though over the years I'd come to learn its strange, emotional language. It would spin wildly during a heated village meeting, point steadfastly towards a house where a new child was being born, or tremble towards the woods when someone spoke a heartfelt, painful truth. It was drawn, I believed, to strong emotion, to truth, to meaning. Lately, it had grown increasingly agitated, its tremors becoming a constant, frantic hum against my chest, where I wore it beneath my tunic. It was a restless, sleeping thing against my heart, a dog whining at a door only it could see. In the deep of night, I would take it out and watch it spin on my desk, a frantic silver beetle chasing a truth it could not name. It felt like a part of me was spinning with it, unmoored and seeking a shore I could not see. The second was a single parchment, fragile as a dried leaf, kept in a sealed tube of polished cherrywood that I kept on my desk. On it, in my grandmother's elegant, spidery hand, was a rhyme, a note hum for a bridge of light, a path revealed by a moonbeam's gleam, a song from the soul to right what's wrong, a word from the heart to mend the stream. A children's lullaby, I'd always thought. A piece of nonsense, a fragment of a dream, a bit of family whimsy. I'd whispered it to myself on lonely nights in the drafty attic room above the archives, a ghost of a comfort from a ghost of a grandmother. But as the silence deepened, the words began to feel different. They lay heavy on my tongue. They tasted of metal and ozone. They felt less like a memory and more like a command waiting to be issued, a set of instructions for a machine I didn't understand. I'd find myself mouthing the words as I worked, the rhythm aligning with the frantic pulse of the compass against my skin, a syncopated beat of impending something. The two heirlooms were in conversation. A silent duet played out on the stage of my life, and I was the audience, who did not know the language, yet was expected to understand the finale. The true crisis, the one that moved the event from unsettling to existential, began when the well in the village square ran dry. Not a gradual dwindling to a trickle, but overnight, the deep, cool water that had sustained Oakhaven for centuries vanished, leaving only damp, crumbling mud and a profound, echoing emptiness that seemed to suck the hope from the very air. The silence had finally stolen something we could not live without. It had moved from the background to the foreground, from an atmosphere to a threat. Panic, silent and grim, finally took hold. We could live without birdsong. We could not live without water. The well silence was different. It was a deep mineral quiet that spoke of dead aquifers and stone bones turned to dust. It was the sound of finality. The village council, their faces etched with a fear they could no longer hide, met in the square. Their hushed arguments bouncing off the silent walls of the cottages. They spoke of sending a party to the Glimmerbrook source, deep in the wood, a taboo that hadn't been broken in living memory. But who would go? Who would dare? The wood was not just silent, it was wrong. It felt like a mouth waiting to close. It was in this atmosphere of choking despair that the stranger arrived. He came at twilight on the third day of the dry well, a tall, gaunt figure emerging from the silent tree line as if born from the shadows themselves. He didn't walk so much as glide, his movements economical and precise, devoid of wasted energy. His robes were of a dark, thick, non-reflective material that seemed to drink the fading light, and a large, oddly shaped case was slung across his back. His name, he said, was Master Corvus. He was not a hero from a song. He was a scholar. His face, a landscape of sharp angles and deep lines that spoke of a lifetime of study and sorrow. And his eyes were old. They held centuries of echoes, of sounds witnessed and lost, libraries of silence and songs stored behind a calm, weary, and terrifyingly perceptive gaze. He asked to speak to the village elders, but word spread like lightning, and soon the entire frightened populace had gathered in the square around the dry well, their faces pale and drawn in the twilight. He moved through us not like a man, but like a shard of the silence itself given form and purpose. The air around him was stiller, the gloom deeper. He stood on the well's stone rim, a stark, commanding silhouette against the purple sky. The empty well a dark void at his feet. He spoke, and his voice was a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in the hollow of your chest. A cello's note played in a tomb. It was the first sound in weeks that didn't feel immediately stifled. It had weight and substance. It landed. "I am a master of resonance magic and echo lore," he announced, and the words themselves felt strange and potent, humming with a power we could feel in our teeth, a vibration that was almost sound. "I am a seeker of the world's lost songs, a cartographer of sonic landscapes. I have traveled across realms, through places where sound has taken solid form, and through deserts of absolute quiet, drawn from 1,000 leagues away, by the growing dissonance that bleeds from this place like a wound. A great music is fading from this world, a blight born not of nature's cycle, but of an ancient betrayal, a theft." He spoke of sound as if it were a tangible geography, a country that could be mapped, explored, and tragically lost. To him, our silence wasn't an emptiness, it was a crime scene. He unslung the case from his back. The latches clicked open with sounds that were shockingly loud, like gunshots in the silent square. Inside, nestled in velvet, the color of a midnight sky, was the frame of a cello. But it was like no cello I had ever seen or imagined. It was carved from a wood that seemed to be made of solidified moonlight, pale and gleaming with an inner pearlescent light. Its elegant feminine form was strung not with gut or metal, but with filaments of glowing silver energy that thrummed with a silent, waiting potential, like captured lightning. It was heartbreakingly beautiful and utterly, tragically incomplete. Its front was missing, its hollow heart exposed to the world, a gaping wound in its perfection. "This is the frame of the cello of Aetherius," Corvus said, his voice filled with a reverence that silenced the crowd's murmurs more effectively than a shout. "An instrument of legend, said to be fashioned from a shard of the first dawn and strung with the breath of the cosmos. It does not merely make music. It harmonizes with the very music of creation itself. It is a tuning fork for reality, a key, not a weapon. But without its heart, the heartwood soundboard, carved from the living wood of the first tree at the heart of Tornu Fern, it is nothing more than a sculpture, a promise unfulfilled, an unanswered question. To find it, I must enter the silenced heart of your wood. And for that..." His ancient eyes scanned the fearful, desperate faces of the villagers, past the strong woodcutters and the hardy farmers, past the council elders, and landed for a moment on me, before continuing his slow, deliberate scan. I felt the gaze like a physical touch, cold and assessing. "I require a guide." He let the words hang in the silent, heavy air. "I need someone who remembers the old paths, not just from maps, but from the stories embedded in the stones. Someone who can still feel the echoes of the song that was, who can navigate not by sight, but by the memory of sound. Someone the wood might still recognize." In that moment, I understood. He wasn't looking for a woodsman. He was looking for a fellow archivist. Someone who could read the world not as it was, but as it had been. As he spoke, the compass beneath my tunic erupted into a frenzy. It wasn't trembling anymore. It was spinning. A whirring vortex of silver and obsidian burning against my skin. It was a physical pull, insistent, relentless. A magnetic force yanking my very bones toward the forbidden, silent darkness of the forest. The path no one had dared walk in a generation. The compass wasn't suggesting. It was demanding. It was a hook in my heart, and the line was pulling taut. I felt every eye in the square turn to me. I was Alara, the archivist, the keeper of maps, the quiet girl with the strange necklace who preferred dust to people. I knew the old trails, the forgotten ways, the lore of the forest borders better than anyone, even old Master Theron, whose eyes were now too weak for detailed work. I saw the hope in their faces, a fragile, desperate thing, warring with their fear for me. I saw Bren the baker, his face etched with worry for his sick wife Lila, look at me with a pleading expression that made my stomach clench. I saw Master Theron himself, my mentor, my only family, give a grim, sad shake of his head, a silent plea for me to stay silent, to stay safe. I had never been a hero. I had no skill with a blade, no hidden power to summon. I had maps and ink, and a head full of dead people's notes, and a heart full of a fear so vast it felt like its own ocean. But as I looked at my neighbors, at the empty, gaping mouth of the well that symbolized our dying world, something welled up inside me, from a place deeper than the fear. It wasn't courage. I was terrified, my knees trembling so hard I feared they would buckle. It wasn't pride. I felt small and insignificant, a mouse proposing to chase away a lion. It was a quiet, stubborn, undeniable resolve, a certainty that bypassed my brain and spoke directly to my soul. This compass was more than an heirloom. It was a connection, a duty, a thread tying me to something greater than my own fear. And so was this journey. My feet were moving before my mind could conjure another reason to stay frozen. I stepped forward into the clear space before the well, my boots scuffing on the stones, the sound absurdly loud. My voice was small, but it didn't vanish into the silence. It held, amplified by the stillness. I will go. The words borrowed my breath, and the village breathed with me. Master Corvus turned his penetrating gaze upon me. You, child? He asked, not with cruelty, but with a deep and weary curiosity, as if I were a rare text he was trying to decipher. Why would you face such peril? The silence in there, it does not just stifle sound, it consumes spirit. It will hollow you out until you are as empty as this well, a shell filled with nothing but your own regrets. I met his eyes, my hand closing around the frantic compass, its vibrations running up my arm like a current. Because I feel it, I said, and my voice grew stronger, fueled by the undeniable truth of the words. The compass, it doesn't just shake, it hums in my blood. It has been pulling me toward the wood for days. It is not just a tool, it is a calling. I took another breath, finding a core of steel I didn't know I possessed. And so is this journey. I had spent my life documenting the choices of others. For the first time, I was making a choice that would become a document itself. He studied me for a long, silent moment, his expression unreadable. He stepped down from the well and approached me. The crowd parted for him as if for a king or a plague carrier. He was taller up close, and he smelled of old parchment, dry air, and something else. Like the ozone smell after a lightning strike, the scent of energy spent. His long, slender fingers did not reach for the compass, but for my hand that held it. His touch was cool, but a shock, like the deep foundational vibration of a struck bell, passed through me. He looked down at the compass visible through my clenched fingers, then back into my eyes, and for the first time, his austere features softened with something akin to awe. By the lost chords of Aetherius, he breathed, his voice full of a scholar's wonder. The silver compass of the Sylvan Wardens. I have only ever read of it in crumbling texts from a time before this silence. It does not point to north, but to truth, to resonance, to the heart of the matter. He released my hand, and the connection broke, leaving my skin tingling. Then you are no ordinary girl. You are a descendant of the Sylvan Wardens, the ancient guardians of this wood. The mark of a true warden lies not in titles or overt power, but in the heart that feels the land's pain as its own. The compass does not guide you, child. It answers you. A descendant, a warden. The words were too large for me. They were titles from one of Master Theron's old tales. They did not fit the girl in the dusty smock. And yet, the compass hummed against my skin. He turned to the villagers, his voice regaining its authority. The guide has been chosen, not by me, but by the old magic itself. We leave at first light. The night was long and sleepless. Master Theron came to my small room under the eaves of the archive, bringing me a leather pack already filled with waybread, a full water skin, and a beautifully detailed hand-drawn map of the forest's outer paths, the safest routes, now rendered useless by the silence. I always knew there was more to you than old maps and quiet ways, Ilara, he said, his voice rough, with an emotion he rarely showed. Your grandmother, Arianel, she had a light about her, a music in her soul that the rest of us lacked. I see it in you now, waking up. He pressed a small, sharp dagger with a bone handle into my hand. For cutting roots, for practicalities, he said, his meaning clear, and left before I could thank him. The door clicking shut softly behind him. I didn't sleep. I sat on my narrow bed, the compass quiet now, a steady warm weight against my chest, pointing unwavering toward my window, toward the wood. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now accompanied by something else, a terrifying, exhilarating sense of purpose. I was not just going into the woods. I was answering a call. I was going home. I packed the map he gave me. It was wrong, but it was a piece of him, a piece of home. I would need it more than the waybread. The border of Taunufern had always been a threshold of life. Crossing it used to be like stepping into a different, more vibrant room of the world. The air would grow richer, the colors deeper, the sounds more complex and layered. Now, it was a wall of death. Taking the first step under the gnarled, overarching branches was like diving into deep, icy water. The temperature dropped instantly. The air was thick, cold and dead, devoid of the scent of pine, loam and blooming things. It smelled of dust, of stagnation, of a room sealed for 1,000 years. The light itself changed, becoming a grey, diffuse gloom, as if the sun were a faded memory, a story told by a forgetful old man. The silence was no longer an absence. It was a presence, a physical weight that pressed on my eardrums, making them ache with the strain of listening to nothing. Every footfall, every rustle of our clothing was swallowed after a bare inch of travel, making us seem like ghosts in our own world, our movements inconsequential, our existence doubtful. My breath caught in my throat, and I found myself holding it, afraid to add my own small, pathetic sound to this immense void. Only the steady, warm hum of the compass against my chest felt real, a tiny, defiant anchor of vibration in a sea of nothing. Corvus moved like a shadow beside me, his eyes constantly scanning, not for physical threats like wolves or bandits, but for something else. Patterns in the gloom, flickers in the periphery. Do not try to feel the silence, he whispered, and his voice was a blessed, solid crack in the void, a rope thrown to a drowning woman. It is a living thing, and it hungers for sound, it feeds on it. Give it nothing, and it may ignore us. Conserve your voice. Speak only when necessary. Your breath is a commodity now. The advice was sound, but here, attending to nothing was its own kind of madness. For hours we walked, the path behind us vanishing into the grey gloom as if it had never existed, the world closing ranks against our passage. I led with the compass, its needle now pointing unwavering ahead, a stark contrast to its previous chaotic dance. I trusted it more than my own eyes, which played tricks in the murk, seeing movement where there was none, faces in the knotted bark of trees, beckoning hands in the sway of dead creepers. The forest was a graveyard of sound. We passed the Glimmerbrook, or what was left of it. It was a ditch of cracked grey mud and skeletal stones, utterly silent, a corpse of a river. We saw a bird's nest, perfectly intact, nestled in a crook of a tree, empty of both eggs and life, a vacant cradle. The trees themselves stood like solemn, petrified sentinels, their leaves grey and brittle, not rustling even when we brushed against them. crumbling to dust at the touch. We came to a gorge, deep and sudden, a black scar slicing through the forest floor. The gorge felt wrong, its edges too sharp, its depth too absolute. A wound in the land itself. A bridge had once spanned it, but now only crumbling stone pillars remained on either side, adorned with faint moss-grown runes that pulsed with a sickly, dying grey light, like a failing heartbeat. The warden's first ward, Corvus said, his hand hovering over the ancient stone without touching it, as if feeling its fading warmth. A bridge of resonance. It does not exist for those who only see with their eyes. It must be called forth with a note of pure intent. He looked at me, his expression grave, the gloom etching deeper lines onto his face. The thief of song, the creature we seek, was once a warden himself, a guardian named Phelan. He loved the music more than anything, but his love became possessive, twisted. He sought to hoard the forest's music, to keep its beauty for himself alone, to never share it, to never let it change or fade. In his greed, he broke the sacred cycle of giving and receiving. He tore the heartwood from the first tree to make it his own, to be the sole instrument of the song. In doing so, he killed the song he loved. He became a parasite, feeding on the resulting silence, and in turn, creating more of it. He is the void weaver now. His hunger is what suffocates this place. We do not go to fight a monster. We go to cure a sickness. The story was a tragedy, not an epic. It made the enemy comprehensible, and in doing so made him more terrible. This was not a dragon to be slain, but a disease of the soul to be healed. I approached the edge of the gorge, the abyss seeming to yawn hungrily below, a maw of nothingness that promised oblivion. The rhyme whispered. A note hummed for a bridge of light. This was it. Not a metaphor, not a lullaby, an instruction. The first test of my blood, of my worth. My mouth was dry as dust. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. What was a note of pure intent? I thought of Oakhaven, of the dry well, of Brent's worry for Lila, a love so deep it was a tangible thing, of the children's stifled laughter, a sound that deserved to be free. I thought of my duty, not as a hero, but as a keeper, a preserver. My intent was not to conquer, but to mend, to restore, to give back what had been taken, to be a conduit for the music, not its master. I closed my eyes, shut out the oppressive, hungry silence, and dove deep within myself, past the fear, past the doubt, to a still clear pool of resolve. I found a single clear note there. It was the note of memory, of hope, of a keeper's steadfast resolve. It was the note of my grandmother's love. With a trembling breath I hummed it. The sound was tiny, a fragile, shimmering thing in that vast, hungry silence. A single firefly in an infinite dark. Yet it did not die. It hung in the air before me, a steadfast point of silver light. The runes on the pillars flared from sickly grey to a brilliant celestial blue, as if drinking in the sound. The note stretched, pulling light from the very air, weaving itself into a structure of solid moonlight and living green moss that arched gracefully and strongly across the chasm. It thrummed with a soft, welcoming, alive energy. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I had done it. Not with strength or power or force of will, but with truth, with selfless intent. Corvus let out a soft sigh that was almost a note of music itself. "The blood remembers," he said, and there was a newfound respect in his voice that hadn't been there before, a recognition that I was more than just a tool. "Well done, Warden." The bridge felt like hope under my feet. It was not stone. It was potential made manifest. It was the first crack in the silence's armor. We crossed the bridge of light, our footsteps silent on its glowing, resilient surface. As we reached the other side, the bridge dissolved back into motes of light that drifted away on the dead air like luminous pollen. The ward was past. The way forward was open. The motes didn't vanish. They clung to our clothes and hair, tiny fading stars marking us as those who had passed the first test. Deeper we went, and the forest grew more twisted, more ancient. The trees were skeletal giants, their branches like clawed fingers scratching at a perpetual twilight sky, their roots like great frozen serpents breaking through the soil. The grey gloom deepened, leaching the colour from our clothes, from our skin, from our hopes. And a new sound began to insinuate itself into the silence. Not a true sound, but the memory of sound, the ghost of it, like a whisper from a room far away, designed to drive you mad with longing. They started as faint, almost imagined sensations at the very edge of hearing, auditory mirages. The cheerful, mindless babble of a stream, a snippet of a forgotten lullaby my grandmother might have sung, a tune that tugged at a heartstring I didn't know I had. My own name, called in a woman's voice, a voice I had no memory of, but that my heart yearned for nonetheless, a siren's call to an orphan's soul. "Steady, Ilara," Corvus murmured, his own voice tense, his body coiled like a spring. "They come. Do not let them in. Build your walls." The whispers were a tailor-made torture. They didn't attack with claws, but with nostalgia, a weapon against which I had no defense. From the gloom, figures emerged, coalescing from the mist and shadow. They were the echo ghouls, as Corvus named them. They had no true form. They were swirls of mist and shadow, shaped by the stolen sounds they mimicked. One rolled toward us like a phantom river, its babbling a perfect, cruel replica of the glimmer brook. But underneath the familiar, comforting sound lay a hollow, desperate, hungry emptiness. Another took the shape of a laughing child, but its eyes were empty, black pits, and its laughter was a record played on a broken machine, looping without joy or soul. A parody of happiness that was more terrifying than any scream. "They are perversions of resonance," Corvus warned, placing a firm, steadying hand on my shoulder as I instinctively recoiled from the child shape. My heart ached for Lyra and Finn, for the simple, real joy they represented. They are the silence itself, wearing the stolen skin of sounds it has consumed. They offer you the memories you crave most, the sounds you most desperately wish to hear again. To listen is to be lost. To follow is to be consumed. Your will is your only shield. Do not engage them. Do not answer. Acknowledge them for the lies they are, and they lose their power. He was right. The ghoul of the stream promised cool, clear water for my parched throat. The child ghoul promised companionship in the terrible, isolating loneliness of the silent wood. They called to the core of my thirst, the marrow of my fear. It was a brutal, psychological siege, an assault on my deepest longings. I gritted my teeth, my hand tight on the compass, its pulse a furious, defiant rhythm against the siren calls. I focused on the compass's hum, making it my mantra. I am here. This is now. That is not real. The ghouls swirled closer, their stolen sounds becoming a deafening roar in my mind, but I held fast to that tiny point of vibration, my only tether to reality. We emerged from the ghoul-haunted section of the woods and found ourselves in a clearing dominated by a single colossal menhir, a stone pillar taller than any tree, its surface etched with swirling, indecipherable runes. At its base lay a shallow, circular basin of stone, now dry and cracked. This was the Well of Whispers, a place of ancient augury and deep connection to the forest's song. Corvus approached it, running a weary hand over the cold, unyielding rock. "This is a test of spirit, Elara. The Well of Whispers is the final gate. It will not part for an ordinary traveler. It demands a song from your soul, a piece of truth that resonates with its own nature. It will offer you a glimpse of a memory, and you must respond with a truth of your own." I felt the air grow heavy with anticipation, the men here humming with a low, expectant energy. Corvus gestured to the basin. "Place your hands here. What it shows you, you must face." The stone was not just cold. It was absorptive. It felt like it was drinking the warmth from my hands, from my blood, pulling me into itself. I knelt, my hands trembling as I placed them into the basin. The stone was impossibly cold, and a chill spread up my arms, a shock to the system. The world dissolved around me. I was standing in a sunny, flower-filled meadow, the air alive with the chirping of birds. My grandmother, Arianel, was there, a vibrant figure with silver hair, her face unlined by time. She was laughing, her voice like distant wind chimes, and she was teaching a small, dark-haired child a simple lullaby. The child was me. I could feel the sun on my skin, the breeze in my hair, the love in her touch. My heart ached with a painful, beautiful longing. The vision faded, and I was back at the well, the cold and the silence a sudden, brutal reality. Corvus was watching me, his eyes full of patience. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice gentle. "My grandmother," I said, the words a raw whisper. "She was singing to me." "What song did you feel?" he asked. I thought of the feeling, the love, the warmth, the hope. "It was the song of belonging," I said, the words finding their rhythm. "The song that tells an orphan they are not alone. The song that tells a village it is a family." The truth of it rang through me. It wasn't about a bloodline or a name. It was about connection. It was the antithesis of Phelan's possessive, lonely greed. As I spoke, a single clear drop of water welled up from the cracked stone of the well basin. It shimmered with a soft inner light. The runes on the menhir flared to life, not with a sickly glow, but with a pure white brilliance. The ground began to tremble, and a hidden passage opened at the base of the menhir, a stairwell leading down into the earth. Corvus nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. "You have passed. The well has answered a question of your soul, and your answer was true. We go on." The single drop of water was the first clean living thing we had seen since entering the wood. It was a promise. The stairs descended into a vast cavern, a subterranean cathedral of twisted roots and living rock. It was here, in the deep heart of the forest, that we found the first tree. It was a site of devastating beauty and heartbreaking ruin. Its colossal trunk reached up into the darkness, its highest branches piercing the earth's surface to touch the sky, but its heart was a gaping wound. A hollow dark void, rhymed with a sickly purple energy that crackled and pulsed like a dying star. Inside that wound, a figure was seated. He was a man with a face both young and ancient, dressed in robes of shimmering, void-like fabric. In his hands he held the heartwood. It was a perfect, polished piece of pale moonlit wood, radiating a soft silver light. But it was not fixed into the cello's frame. It was floating, held in place by threads of the same purple energy that pulsed around the wound. He was not playing it. He was listening to it, a rapt, and terrible expression on his face, as if drinking in a sound that only he could hear. This was Phelan, the Void Weaver. He was the silence, made flesh. The cavern was an inversion of the archives. Instead of scrolls of knowledge, there were roots of memory. Instead of preserving history, it was being hoarded, trapped in a single repeating moment. "He's not a monster," I whispered, the sight more sorrowful than I could have imagined. "He's just broken. He has become the very thing he sought to master," Corvus murmured. "A conduit for a silence that is now absolute. He has consumed the song to preserve it, and in doing so he has... Damned it. The music he hears is a lie, an echo of the past, trapped in an eternal loop, a prison of his own making." We stepped into the clearing. Phelan's head snapped up, his empty dark eyes fixing on me and the compass on my chest. A flicker of something, recognition, passed across his face. He held the heartwood closer, his fingers stroking its surface. "A Sylvan Warden," he croaked, his voice a dry, rasping thing, a sound of stone grinding on stone. "Come to reclaim a broken world." He laughed, a brittle, joyless sound. "You cannot mend what you did not build. I was a child of this music. I heard it in my soul. I loved it more than you can know. They let it fade, they let it weaken. I did what I had to do. I captured its essence so that its perfection would not be lost to the whims of time, to the slow, careless forgetting of generations." His voice grew, a hollow drumbeat that resonated in the void. "I am the keeper of the true song. It lives forever here, in my silence." His words were the ultimate perversion of my own purpose. He was a keeper too. But where I preserved to share, he preserved to possess. We were mirror images, and the realization chilled me to the bone. Corvus stepped forward, his own voice low and steady, a counter-harmony to Phelan's dissonance. "The song was never meant to be a static thing, Phelan. It was a living, breathing harmony. It required the world's discord to make it beautiful. The sorrow of a grieving heart, the rustle of a windswept leaf, the cry of a newborn child. These were all notes in its vast score. You sought to preserve a single, perfect chord, and in doing so, you tore the heart from the entire symphony. You are not a keeper. You are a jailer." The Void Weaver stood, his eyes blazing with a cold, hungry fire. "Then you will be consumed as well. Your foolish hope, your frail human heart. I will make you a part of my perfect silence." He extended a hand, and a wave of raw, oppressive nothingness rolled toward us. It was not wind or heat. It was pure silence, a force that sought to erase us, to extinguish our very existence. The air grew impossibly thin, a vacuum that stole the oxygen from our lungs. I felt my voice, my very thoughts, begin to crumble under the pressure. Corvus, however, was prepared. He unslung the frame of the cello of Aetherius, its silver filaments humming with a silent power. He turned to me, his face etched with grim resolve. "This is the moment, Elara. The cello of Aetherius cannot be made whole by force. It can only be completed by a single, resonant note from a heart that understands its true purpose. Your grandmother's rhyme, it was a spell. Not for a bridge, not for a door. For this." He was not handing me a weapon. He was handing me a key. And I was the lock. He handed me the beautiful, incomplete instrument. The moonlight wood was cold and smooth beneath my hands. The filaments of silver energy pulsed like a waiting heart. The air was a suffocating, soundless pressure, threatening to crush me. I was nothing but a fragile container for fear. But the rhyme returned to me. not as a memory, but as a living, urgent pulse in my blood. A song from the soul to right what's wrong. A word from the heart to mend the stream. I closed my eyes, and I didn't think of Oakhaven, or the well, or the Glimmerbrook. I thought of a single, simple truth I had learned on this journey. The great music of the world was not a monument to be preserved in silence. It was a conversation, a give and take, a shared breath. I had to give a part of myself to mend it, not with a note I had heard, but with a note of my own unique, broken, and resilient heart. This was the final archive entry, not written in ink, but in sound. The story of Alara. I leaned in, my mouth to the waiting hollow heart of the cello. The rhyme's last words were a mantra in my mind. A word from the heart too, mend the stream. I didn't hum a note of memory as I had at the bridge. I sang a single pure note of my own being, a song of my gratitude for my grandmother, for Master Theron, for the village that was my family. A song of a quiet girl with a dusty past who was now a warden of the living. It was my song, my truth. It was a sound so personal, so heartfelt, that it was a physical thing. It was me. The note went out into the void, a fragile, brilliant point of light. The void weaver shrieked, a sound of pure negation as the note struck him. Not as an attack, but as a cure. The note of my truth. The heartwood, the sacred soundboard, hummed in response, vibrating with an ancient, loving energy. It shot forward from Phelan's grasp, drawn by the undeniable resonance, and slotted perfectly into the hollow heart of the cello of Aetherius. The instrument was made whole. The shriek thinned, not with pain, but with understanding. The sound of a man, after centuries of silence, finally hearing the devastating truth of what he had done. The silence in the cavern broke, not with a bang, but with a crescendo. The cello of Aetherius didn't play a melody. It played a single, unified, resounding chord. It was the deepest note of the first tree, the gentle murmur of the Glimmerbrook, the chirping of the dawn finches, the laugh of a child, the quiet conversation of ancient oaks, the sound of rain on a roof, the clatter of plates, the thrum of a heartbeat, the whispered word of gratitude to a tree. It was every sound, great and small, made into a single, breathtaking, perfect symphony. The music flowed out from the cavern, a wave of living, vibrant energy. The grey gloom of the forest broke apart like shattered glass, replaced by brilliant green and gold light. The silent riverbed of the Glimmerbrook filled with dancing, chattering water. The trees, petrified for so long, rustled their leaves in a great, exultant sigh. The music rushed back to Oakhaven, a tidal wave of life. The village well, once an empty grave, overflowed with cool, clear water. The birds who had only been waiting returned and filled the air with a joyous, chaotic overture. The song was restored. It was not a return to what was. It was a rebirth. The symphony was the same, but it was played on new instruments. It was the same song, but we were different listeners. We would never hear it casually again. And so, the song was restored. Master Corvus, the Seeker, gave me the now complete cello of Aetherius to be the new heartwood of the forest. He bowed to me, no longer as a guide, but as a fellow warden, and then without a word vanished into the restored, vibrant green of Tarnu Fern, a scholar onto his next great silent journey. I returned to Oakhaven, a keeper no longer just of maps, but of a living, breathing magic. The silence that had once defined me was gone, replaced by the great music of my home, a melody I now knew not just from memory, but from my soul. My legacy was no longer the dust of the archives. It was the song in the air, a gift returned, an echo made whole again. I often walked to the edge of the wood, not to go in, but to listen, to hear the conversation. I am its keeper, its archivist. And sometimes, if I hum a note of pure gratitude, the trees sigh in response, and the light bridge shimmers just for a moment, a forgotten star winking in the daylight. A reminder. And I, Ilara, keeper of the Moonlit Archives. I found my voice, not in the quiet, but in the chorus.